Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. I am your host, Miss Devi Ward Erickson, joined today by some of my favorite people on the planet, my friends, colleagues, and graduates of the Institute. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the beautiful and illustrious Miss Karen Craig. In the lower left-hand corner, at least to my eye, we have the beautiful Miss Rosie Bitts. And just beneath me, we have Lucia Vasquez. And thank you all for joining us here. And if you want to learn more about each of our wonderful additional hosts and guests on the show, just make sure that you check our blog and check our website, and you will see all of their amazing info on how you can learn more with them and from them. So today we are going to do a sexologist panel. So we are all ACS certified sexologists, certified authentic tantra practitioners, as well as some additional certificates and accreditations that we all have individually. And so the last Thursday of every month, we wanted to take the opportunity to answer your questions, you as listeners. We have accrued many, many questions over the years and over the weeks. And now that we are having radio shows more regularly every Thursday, I want to dedicate at least one show a month to answering your questions, because you have such amazing thoughts and amazing ideas about your own reality and your own sexuality and how you can have an even more fulfilling experience. And we want to support you in that as much as possible. So today I'm just going to take the liberty of reading some questions, and we're all going to go around as a panel and share our 10 cents. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So our first question today has to do with sexual healing and therapy. And so some of our wonderful listeners may have had this experience. It's a very, very common experience. And so I chose this question specifically because I believe it can clear up so much for so many people who are perhaps having the same struggle. So the question is, recently I decided to start some therapy to help aid in my practice of healing past sexual assault. Prior to therapy, I was doing pretty well with my practice and was starting to achieve great orgasms. I'd moved past some numbness and pain. However, since I started therapy, I feel like I've moved 10 steps back. I have almost no libido and I'm struggling just to continue practicing. Even the relationship with my husband seems to be suffering. Can you help? So, who wants to dive into that one? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm assuming that what she's referring to is traditional talk therapy. Mm-hmm. And so traditional talk therapy is really, what we call a bottom down approach, as opposed to what we do, which is the somatic approach, which is a top down approach, and what we do is a bottom up approach. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm not sure, of course, what's going on with her and the form of therapy she's receiving. But it could be that what's happening is that they're just focusing on kind of what's in her head and not what's in her body. Mm-hmm. And authentic tantra is a somatic healing modality. Mm-hmm. So it deals with the emotions and the dysregulation and all of that in our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. And it's really, about soma, which is the connection between the mind and the body. Mm-hmm. So it might be that, she's kind of like the therapist is focusing on just kind of that head aspect of her and what's happened before. And so then it's kind of re-showing up that trauma in her body, and it's not really being processed adequately. Because when things come up, then they have to be processed in the body and in the nervous system, so that it becomes re-regulated, and they walk into a place where there are like new neural pathways and those kinds of things. So that's what I'm thinking may be going on.
Beautiful. Thank you. What about you, Rosie or Lucia? Lucia.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that that's exactly what happened with myself. I went through a lot of talk therapy for several years I'm a sexual abuse survivor. And for me, it was like I felt as though I wasn't really tackling it from the root. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just stayed, midway on the surface. And so a lot of it just kept coming up, and it would just kind of float there. Mm-hmm. And so when I started doing the tantric practices, I felt like it was more of getting down deep into the roots and really embodying that. And so it then, I felt like this nice flow, like a release of some kind that was able to overcome a lot of things that I had been working on for years.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's very potent, it's very powerful. But because it is a more of a somatic approach, it definitely really worked for me. And I've seen it work for many others in the same way, this approach.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucia. How about you, Rosie? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, very similar to Karen and Lucia. Beautiful points. I've had really good results working with clients who are also working with a therapist at the same time. I think we can get really stuck in that intellectual level of our pain. And, like both of the other women said, we need to process that through the body. And it's something that started in the body, right? It needs to be released somatically. But I've had this wonderful opportunity a couple of times working with clients where they're working with a therapist. So, I deal on the somatic level, and then sometimes I'll send them off to their therapist with like, oh, this came up. Go explore this further. Come back to me. We're going to work it through the body, right? And if you can do that, I think that's a beautiful blending, because certainly talk therapy is very good for different things. But at the same time, I think you need to be careful. You can get stuck there, and that's why you end up with people going to talk therapy for like 10 or more years. I don't think that's healthy. I think eventually we want to return to health and well-being, right? And if we work on a holistic level, then we can return to full health. And what I found too from my own personal practices in recovering from early child sexual abuse is that these practices are so interesting in the way that they work. Like I will have something rise to the surface even now, an old memory or something that just wasn't, I hadn't worked through. And I had done lots of talk therapy in my early life, but it will come to the surface now. And because my body is so ready to release, it actually just goes. It doesn't cause me a lot of trauma. I don't have to go back into the old stories. It's just something that comes to the top of my mind. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it. And then it's gone and it's healed. It's that quick.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that's a wonderful signpost of how completely you've evolved, right? In the past, things would arise and it would take a while to process through, and no judgment at all. I mean, sometimes it still takes a while to process through, but there is a distinct difference now when some things arise, and it's just by looking at them, they just kind of disappear. Yeah. Right? They just kind of dissolve. What I was hearing in the question was that this particular person, had done some work previously with their sexual trauma or their sexual abuse, and was practicing with it and was getting good results, and then decided to go to talk therapy. And it seems as though the talk therapy started to stir up some sediment and maybe a deeper layer of healing. So that's the thing when it comes to healing that I think a lot of us may get frustrated with sometimes. Like, oh my God, why am I dealing with this again? I already processed this through. It's that it's layers upon layers upon layers. We as human beings contain multitudes. We are layers upon layers upon layers. So we may work really well and process through on one level. And then if we go to another experience or we start examining something more fully and more deeply, it's going to like stir that up. I think of it sediment at the bottom of a water glass, right? And it stirs it up. And so there's going to be a somatic response to that. And so that's what I was hearing is as this person began examining consciously, like talking and working through the trauma, it started to show up somatically. And so the results that they were experiencing before, they weren't having access to anymore. And so what we do in that situation, because this happens all the freaking time, for me, this happens all the time, is like, oh, wow. So we understand that there's 4 stages to somatic healing, to the somatic healing process: numbness, pain, irritation, and then function. And so if I was having lots of function, and then I encounter, a shadow that I'm examining, and my body responds by numbness or pain or irritation, I know that I'm working through a deeper layer of healing, a deeper layer of trauma that's arising to the surface, purified. So we just have to be patient, right? So we just have to practice patience, continue engaging our methods, and have trust that as this layer purifies, as this cloud clears, the sun of our life is going to shine even more brightly on the other side. So it's a process. Healing is a process. There's going to be an ebb and a flow and a back and a forth. And we've all experienced that time and time again.
Well, and I think it's really important too for people to realize that, number one, they are not alone. There are so few of us that get to come through this life without some level of trauma, and especially sexual trauma. So, you know, they're not alone, and that there is no timeline, right? This takes as long as it takes. Healing just takes as long as it takes, and that's okay. There's no need to rush. You're not broken. You know, you can go in and out of like, oh, I'm feeling great, I'm feeling juicy, I'm feeling sexy, to like completely shut down again because you're going through something deeper, and that's okay.
Yes, exactly. And I love that perspective. It's so important that we're not broken. We are whole, and we just have defense mechanisms, right? The body numbness is perfect. That is your body's defense mechanism saying, I don't want you to hurt, so I'm going to go away. I'm going to shut down and I'm going to leave this area of the body. And so that's actually our body's defense mechanisms operating exactly perfectly the way they were designed. So when we encounter those, it's a wonderful reminder that everything is happening exactly as it should be. There's nothing broken, and we're moving towards greater wholeness. Yeah, beautiful. Yay. Okay, awesome. So next question is having to do with social anxiety. So question coming into the Institute, and by the way, if anyone wants, if you as a listener would love your question answered on Sex is Medicine Radio, please send it to connect@authentictantra.com. And so this question came in. I was wondering if this practice, meaning the Authentic Tantra modality, could help with social anxiety disorder and shyness. I've always been so nervous when it comes to expressing myself and speaking up. Just being around other people makes me very uncomfortable. Can this help? So what are your thoughts on that? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
Go, Rosie.
Because I've been, you know, we've all been studying polyvagal theory to one degree or another, and I've been like super diving into it. And man, you know, doing Tantra, like it's ancient traditions that science and kind of psychological medicine has finally caught up with. We are doing everything we need to do to heal that social anxiety, to be able to have healthy social engagement, to repattern attachment styles, to calm our nervous system. You know, everything you need to cure that is absolutely in a tantric practice.
Beautiful, beautiful. What are your thoughts, you guys?
Well, and so social anxiety often is rooted in some kind of trauma, you know, in some kind of adverse childhood experience or at some point in life, but typically in childhood, like sometime before 18. And so then it shows up, and what's happened is it's affected, as Rosie said, our social engagement system. Mm-hmm. So what I absolutely love about this modality, about Authentic Tantra, is that kind of the whole point is connection. Yeah. So reconnecting with ourselves, reconnecting with those parts of ourselves that have been wounded or have felt that shyness or felt shut down because we spoke out, and then, you know, a teacher or whomever, you know, shushed us. And so then we just kind of, you know, quiet that part of ourselves. So with this, because every aspect of it is about our inner connection, and then which facilitates our ability to connect with other people with more authenticity and with such a greater sense of ease and confidence. So, I mean, it's a somatic approach and a holistic approach, but like all of it is what brings us to a space, and especially for those with social anxiety, because everybody's got it a little bit, but, you know, clinical social anxiety, to really come to a place of wholeness and healing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Wow. What are your thoughts, Lucia?
Yeah, I've learned a lot of great tools, and one of them is the ocean breathing, and I think it's a really powerful tool that would really help many in this social anxiety. Especially, it's been working great for myself, but also for my oldest son. He deals with, you know, a fear of going outside, and for many different reasons. And when working with the breathing technique, it's activating your vagus nerve so that you're in more of a relaxation mode. But it's more of a, it feels more embodied, more powerful, versus the different breathing techniques that I learned when doing the talk therapy. It brought it to a different level.
Wow.
And for me, I think it's because of the use of sound that's incorporated, and relaxing the entire body. And so it's just been a really, really great resource to turn to. And then also when working with clients, the whole idea of safety and feeling safe in the body, and giving yourself the permission to feel that safety, has been a great, has been great in working with this.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And just to clarify, the ocean breath technique that we referred to, that Lucia was referring to, and that we may refer to in multiple episodes, is the ocean breath is developed by Carla Tara. So she currently spells it OSHUN, and it is a very unique yin or feminine breathing style that does engage or activate the vagus nerve and helps restore a relaxed balance of the autonomic nervous system. It is the most effective tool that we've encountered. And my thoughts on this is in regards to social anxiety, is being mindful that social anxiety and many of the other mental health issues that we see in the society are symptoms of trauma. Gabor Mate, who's a trauma expert, for those of you that don't know, says that all chronic illness without exception is rooted in usually childhood trauma, and all addiction is rooted in trauma. So issues like social anxiety, my first question, if we had a client coming to us, is, well, let's talk about your childhood. Like what are some of the experiences that you had growing up that may have caused a dysregulation in your nervous system? That's what social anxiety is an indication of. It's a dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system as a result of a traumatic experience being locked in there. So what we want to do is acknowledge the trauma, examine it to the degree that we need to, and then implement tools to restore the relaxed balance. Re-regulate the nervous system. That's what we're looking to do, re-regulate the nervous system. And so that can be done through a variety of tantric methods, tantric and non-tantric methods, right? We are partial to the authentic tantra methods because we love them and they work for us and we use them, but there's other methods that may work for different people. So.
Well, and one, quick note on the ocean breath and the power of that breathing technique in particular, although I've done other ones that are also powerful. So, there's like you just said, an array of really great techniques out there. Mm-hmm. But I've had whole classes, because I also teach burlesque, who just as they're about to do their graduation performance, and these are people who sometimes have never performed before, they're doing a strip tease on stage, high levels of anxiety. So I'll have whole classes backstage all doing ocean breath together. And it's something I'll teach them early on. And I'm not leading it anymore. Somebody will pipe up and be like, okay, who wants to do ocean breath right now? And then there'll be this whole backstage group doing ocean breath right before something that's highly anxiety provoking. So it's incredible. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And one of her graduates shared a post. She's doing a holistic nutrition class. And so they were talking about the vagus nerve in this class and talking about different ways you can engage the vagus nerve. And it's like gag or choke yourself or, these violent things to activate the vagus nerve. And we're just like, how wonderful that we can go, like, it's a very clear difference between a pleasure-based approach versus the conventional approach to healing, right?
Yeah.
Yay. All right. So moving along, let's talk about pleasure. Also, is there any way to make self-pleasuring exciting again? It used to always feel so good when I stimulated my clitoris, but now it seems boring. I've never used a vibrator, by the way. I got so used to being stimulated by porn that connecting with myself isn't as good as it used to be before I used external stimuli. I want to be able to turn myself on again without watching or listening to anything. Any help is appreciated. So this is right up your alley. Rosie, what do you think?
Self-pleasure is all up my alley. Yes.
But I also meant the correlation between pleasure and porn. right? In which she's
Yeah.
noticing as a diminishment in her ability to experience pleasure just from her own self-connection because she's been resorting to this external, relying upon this external stimuli.
I think a big part of it is retraining, right? And it's not so, I think when we're little children, we're exploring our bodies, it feels good. And when we get into sort of puberty, that expands. And many of us who were born before porn was so easily accessible had to learn to have a wide array of fantasies to get us off, right? You had your mind and you had your hand. And that in so many ways is very, very, very healthy. And I think in this day and age, it's really about retraining, because it's not that our minds can't stimulate us, it's that we're used to junk food, the junk food of sexuality. We're used to a Big Mac, and you got to retrain your palate to have that, steak dinner or that vegan 4-course dinner, whatever it is that turns you on. So I would say spending the time and seeing it. Again, people often think, oh, well, it's just me. I don't have this right. Everybody else can just immediately feel sexy and get off. No, it's actually something that you create in your life. You take some time, you make sure you've got privacy. The kids aren't going to be knocking on your door, or you're not going to be interrupted. You create a little tantric temple in your bedroom, in your private space. And then you start to think about and go over the things that are sexy. And I would I would go from, if you're used to only watching porn, take it down a notch and get into reading erotica, right? And that will help you. And then take that down a notch, right? So you get back to being in a place where you can use your brain as an erogenous zone, which it is.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that analogy of we get hooked on junk food. Right? And junk food's great once in a while, right? But you don't want a steady diet of it, because otherwise you'll end up like Supersize Me and all effed up. Right? If you don't know that analogy, Google Supersize Me.
Well, and I think that porn is the same, right? There's porn, certain types of porn, and porn in healthy doses, and porn to get you over a hump is a wonderful, and I'm a huge supporter of sex work. I'm a huge supporter of people in the porn industry. But yeah, you don't want to eat McDonald's French fries all the time. You want to learn how to cook at home to sustain yourself.
Exactly. What are your thoughts, Karen?
Yeah, I think too, a lot of it, our level of excitement is connected with our intention. So if our intention is to just kind of get off, then that can become routine. If it's just to kind of, get that hit, get that orgasm, then after some time it becomes routine. But if, the way we view it as tantrikas and an authentic tantra is that it's about like this self-exploration and this connection to ourselves, to our bodies. And with exploration, it's like an adventure. It's never the same because you discover something new. If you're viewing it as I'm exploring my body sexually, I'm exploring my emotions as they connect to all of that, then it becomes like really expansive. And you're like, okay, so what am I going to discover today? And then the other piece of it, when you're connecting with a partner, if you don't know yourself, really, how's your partner going to know you? So when you know yourself, you know how to engage much differently when you're in partner practice. And then when you're, at solo self-play, you learn the nuances of your body. And it is exciting, to find that there's like, one labia that feels different than the other labia. It's like, oh, wow, look what I discovered today about myself. So, and as Rosie was saying, then when you weave into that, like the sensual, your sensory experiences, your sight and smells and all of that, and create your outer environment, and then create that internally, you've got a whole party going on.
Amen, sister. And I love that, really being mindful of the goal, because so much of conventional sexuality is that climax. It's that dopamine hit orgasm when we literally get addicted to it, right? That dopamine circuit. And so if that's our only goal, then it does get boring and it can get frustrating. And like, if that's what you're focusing on when you're stimulating and you can't quite get there, then you're going to need ever increasing stimulation to actually get that. So I love that, removing the goal of orgasm from sex and replacing it with the goal of connection and connection through pleasure. That's a really important piece. Our motivation is everything. What do you think, Lucia? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, this was about learning how to re-love myself again, because before the big traumas in my life were present, I did love myself, and I'm aware of what those things were and what I did with myself. I didn't know it at that time, but I'm aware of it now. And so when these traumas took place, there was a huge disconnect. And so learning how to reconnect with myself, how to love myself at a deeper level, the level that I deserve, help bring that pleasure back in. And so that was a big thing for me. Going through or pretty much all of the tantric practices have been taking off and shedding off those layers that were in the way of me being able to love myself. And once that, started to come back, then I was able to, I was given the proper tools that allowed me to say, oh my gosh, I do have needs and wants, and I do care about myself. And what do I need in my environment when it comes to self-pleasure that's going to be making me feel happy and joy and the sensuality in myself. And so if that means bringing in different musics, if it means putting on some nice lingerie, which I love lingerie. And so whatever it is, bringing that back into my life, and naturally then the joy of everything comes out.
So it's like a beautiful reclamation.
Yes.
So profoundly, Lucia. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our next question is going to be about, is there a place for porn in Tantra? We'll get to that in a moment. But speaking directly to our listeners' question about this inability or this block, we'll say, around experiencing pleasure just from their own touch and their own presence versus being stimulated through porn, it's really important to be patient with yourself, right? When you decide to make a shift in any pattern, right? So patterns have neural pathways that are like laid down in the brain and the nervous system, and they're our normal way of operating. And so if we're going to change our eating habits, it takes a while to continue. We have to consistently keep redirecting our attention in order to change, to break those patterns, to break those neural pathways and reestablish new ones. So same thing with our sex. If we've been wiring our brain and our nervous system for a specific thing, for a specific result, it's going to take time to redirect that. It's going to take time to break that pattern and reestablish a new pattern. And it absolutely can be done because of neuroplasticity. I mean, it proves it over and over again. It is possible. And it's really helpful to have effective tools to do that, so you don't kind of get lost in the woods. It's really wonderful to have the support of effective tools, time-tested, and guidance, someone who can support you through that rewiring process, someone who's preferably done it themselves. So that's my thought on that is be patient, be kind, be loving, compassionate. And if you really want to start that process of rewiring and you're feeling stuck on your own, then get a coach, right? Reach out for some help, get some support. So the next question, this comes up a lot, and this also, I'm going to add fantasy to this too. So there's a lot of misconception around Tantra that, like, when you're doing tantric masturbation or tantric lovemaking, that it has to look a certain way. Like, it can only be slow, and it can only be this like, la, like spheres of light ringing, and you can't think about anything other than your body. Like, you can't fantasize, there's no erotica, you can't get turned on by anything other than just like the present moment in your breath. And then there's, which sometimes isn't very arousing. Sometimes it's not, And then of course pornography, because there is a my belief about the current relationship to pornography in this society is that it's symptomatic of sexual trauma. It's symptomatic of the unhealthy view of sexuality in mainstream culture, which is like foundationally, sex is an appetite. Like our sex drive is literally an appetite. It's nourishment. It is literally a source of nourishment, just like food. And if every time you felt hungry, you judged yourself, felt shame, you had to eat in the closet as quickly as you could and then hope nobody ever knew, you would probably be institutionalized. In fact, we recognize when that occurs for people that is a disorder. So the current view the current mainstream view of sexuality is a disorder. It is our society is sexually dysfunctional. And the unhealthy relationship or imbalanced relationship with porn is a symptom of that imbalance. It's not that porn is wrong or bad. I support sex work in all of its forms. I especially support sex workers. I think they are like reincarnated tantric bikinis. And I very much support erotica in general. And in fact, erotica has an ancient history. Like porn has been around from the beginning of time. Since the time human beings could draw symbols, they were drawing people fucking. Like, the shamans are like, I went to this alternate universe and I brought back these numbers. Oh, and by the way, here's people fucking. Because it's hot. Because it's arousing to watch people in the throes of pleasure. Our nervous systems respond to that. When we were all in caves together, all huddled together, who knew what was happening? Some people think that they know what was happening, but who knows? All kinds of wonderful, but we were definitely listening to each other fucking. We were definitely doing that, right? So being turned on by watching other human beings have sex is natural. That's like being hungry when you see chocolate cake, or salivating when you see chocolate cake. It's normal. It's natural. The issue is not porn itself. The issue is the unhealthy relationship that we have with pornography as a society as a result of sexual oppression and sexual repression. So that's my view of pornography in general. So how do you guys feel that relates to Tantra? Like, what is your view on the intersection between Tantra and pornography? Is there a place for pornography in the realm of Tantra? Or do you have to set aside your Tantra and watch porn? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the objective of Tantra is to be fully present and to be fully aware and to be fully connected. So connected to yourself, connected to how you're feeling in terms of physically, emotionally, spiritually, the whole nine, and then connecting to a partner if you're engaged with a partner. So I guess kind of like one of the issues with porn is that it can take you away from that connection. So your focus and connection is more on what the other people are doing rather than your own connection, and your connection to your own body and your connection to your partner. And real sex, especially tantric sex, can be very nuanced. Yeah. Like if you try to film it, it'd probably be pretty boring.
Not all this roar. It could sometimes you're just being present and staring at each other while you're in union, right? It's not a whole lot of bells and whistles.
Yeah, and even if it's so with my husband, who's also a tantrika, but so what we discovered is sometimes just slowing it down, but I mean to the point where it's you have to really focus, okay, is he touching me? Is he touching me there? And then it's mind blown. It's a whole different level of experience because your total attention, your whole nervous system, every fiber of your being is focused on that. So it just engages you in a whole different way than kind of that outer stimulation.
Beautiful.
Again, not right or wrong, but it's just a whole different experience.
Yeah. Being mindful of the difference. Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Lucia?
Yeah, I believe that those who are addicted to the porn, that when they're doing their tantric, if they're wanting to learn about the tantric practices, it's about being more embodied. And so, separating the two is usually best when you're diving into these tantric practices, because it just presents like a distraction. And if you're being distracted, then you're not going to be able to fully embrace the embodiment of these tools. And I think that when you're, if you have a partner and you are trying to be, more focused and cultivate connection, try doing it without the porn, because the more you practice and the more you practice some of these tantric practices in union, the more you're going to naturally feel the energetic waves coming. And just like how Karen, you said, it's going to naturally flow, and you're going to feel it through your entire body. And when you do, it's because you are focused, you're present, you are embracing the energetic field of both yourself and your partner, and you're at a different level. And then you're going to slowly, because of it, it's going to be so, enjoyable that you're going to start letting go of not having to need that porn there.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And what are your thoughts, Miss Rosie?
I think that, I think that porn can, like, as I was saying, can be a bit of a stepping tool. It can be something that you can use as a tool to get you to the space that you want, to have more conscious sex. I think having conscious sex while kind of deeply enthralled in porn is really hard, right? It is an outward focus. But I think things like using fantasy with a partner, you can, bring that into your sex life and have that be part of your tantric practice. And that can be a really connecting activity. It can be part of your play, right? Or even using role play or different types of erotica can really stimulate your connection, deepen your connection as you're learning more about each other, as you're becoming more vulnerable with each other. And I think that can totally be incorporated. I think as to whether, I think if you're very conscious about your tantric practice, certainly I think most of what you can do can be tantric.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. It's a certain, it really depends on where you are on that continuum, because at a certain point, everything becomes an expression of your practice, right? Everything becomes an expression of the realization of your practice. And my view on porn and tantra is it really depends on your relationship, your starting relationship with it. So for me, I was very prudish, which is ironic because I used to be a stripper, right? But when it came to porn, like I never watched it, like had no connection to it, and had a lot of judgment and aversion to it. I thought it was gross and disgusting. So when I first started doing Tantra, and I was invited to like watch porn while I was being pleasured, and watch porn when something else was happening, or use it, engage with it consciously as a tool for transformation, it was revolutionary for me. It helped move through some blocks I had around shame, sexual shame, what was acceptable. It helped me embrace my desire more fully to dive into the realm of visual erotica and allow myself to enjoy it. That was hugely transformational for me. So it really depends on where you are in your relationship with porn, and also how you use it. Again, everything comes down to motivation. What is your intention? Are you using this as a tool for deeper connection? Are you using it as a tool to understand more about yourself? Are you using it as a tool to learn more about yourself and your partner? Or are you using it as a tool to disassociate? And that's that fine edge, that fine line that I think maybe some people initially when they engage in porn is like, ooh, I'm just exploring. But after a while, because of sexual repression and shame and guilt, it becomes an unhealthy pattern and unhealthy habit. So in those cases, it's probably useful to let go of that. Like, it's kind of like with any addiction, right? You let go of it for a little while, you take a break and you recenter and resource connection here as opposed to here with the substance or the thing. And then if you're able to come back into a relaxed balance with it. Not everybody has the ability to come into rebalance after having an addiction. It really just depends on each of us. We're also very individual. But again, is there a place for porn and tantra? It really depends on your relationship with it. Can it be used as a tool for healing? Absolutely. But it's up to you to have the mindfulness and the presence to be able to use it that way, to apply it that way. What were you going to say, Rosie?
Well, I was going to say, I think it also depends on the porn you're watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's such a variety of different types of porn out there. And for most of us who are fairly sensitive, we feel like, I remember watching porn as a young woman and being like, that looks like it hurts.
Yeah.
I don't believe that any of her sounds are pleasurable sounds. That looks painful. I think her face is showing me pain. And we know biological markers too. When you see, some of the things that are happening and you see actually like no signs of arousal on that woman's body, or you see these poor men who are just like, having to take Viagra to get their dicks hard, and there's like no signs of arousal on their body. You feel that, and it feels inauthentic. Exactly. And as a human, you're having this mixed reaction. Like, I get to see them doing this thing, so I should be aroused, but I'm also repulsed. And you can pick porn where the actors, you can pick porn where actors are having a great time. Like the Hump Film Festival, for instance, people are making their own porn. They are having the time of their lives. You get to see it one time. But there are porn sites that are very much about pleasure, where, the stars of the porn films are in pleasure, are in communication, are feeling connected, right? And that makes a big difference to me.
That is huge. And thank you for bringing up that point, because that's very, very true. So that's one of the ways that I used porn way back when, 12 years ago or whatever, when I was training, was observing it and noticing how it felt in my body, how my body responded to it. That was such a wonderful learning tool, because you're absolutely correct. There were some people that they looked lovely, like physically, but it was like cardboard. It was like watching cardboard rub against each other. There was no energetic transmission. And then there were other people that were having the time of their lives, and my body would respond. Like my yoni would start engorging. I would get wet. I'd be like, ooh, I'd be aroused. And it's because of feeling the energy, right? And so intellectually, there's no reason, why I would respond differently, but energetically and just on the level of our nervous systems, like we do feel things. That's the way human beings are wired. We are wired to feel each other. That's not woo, that's science, right? So yeah, that's a really important point, is what kind of porn are you watching? And if we have a tendency, if there's someone who maybe has a tendency to watch more of the emotionally devoid porn, maybe start exploring porn with more connection and more true expressions of pleasure, and see how that changes your relationship to it.
Yeah. Something you said reminded me of a story when you talked about motivation. One time my husband and I were on vacation, and the remote wasn't turning the channel, so he had fallen asleep, like he was taking a nap. So then it was on this one porn channel, and it wouldn't change. And so then I was like, really watching it. And so then when he woke up, I was like, well, I learned some new skills while you were asleep.
Yeah.
Like you said, it depends on how you use it and how you
exactly, as a teaching tool. I mean, and that's the thing for some couples who are really kind of like, we have no idea what to do, and we don't really know how to connect or stimulate each other sexually. It can be used as a wonderful tool to just sit there together, potentially fully dressed even, and just use it as a way to connect. Like, talk about what you're seeing. Like, wow, how does that feel to you? And does that look like something you'd like to try? Or, like you were saying, that doesn't look like it feels good. Like, I don't ever want to do that. But just as a conversation tool between couples, you can literally use it to enhance your intimate relationships. But again, it's all in our approach. And it has to be with mindfulness. And I think like so much of the unhealthiness around porn is because we're not allowed to talk about sex. We're not allowed to talk about sex. We're not allowed to talk about pleasure. We're not allowed to talk about orgasm. So all this stuff is literally happening in the closet. We keep it in the closet, in the dark, shutters shut, turn off the lights, and there's all this emotional shame around it. And then we think we're the only ones. And then it just kind of festers and becomes toxic, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, they say the most porn is watched in the Bible, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, a symptom of when and particularly our sexual desire, which is so potent, right? It is literally the desire for life itself. It's the move towards sex is a move towards life, right? And so to repress that life drive is going to cause dysfunction. Like, you cannot do that and expect there to be wellness. All right, so our last question has to do with, does semen retention matter if you have a vasectomy? So there was a long question, and so I'll read it quickly. Question they were wondering about semen retention. Does it apply differently to men who have vasectomies? Do you think the loss of energy, vitality from too much ejaculation is mainly due to the loss of sperm, which wouldn't occur with men after a vasectomy? Or would it be more related to the energy dip from the act of ejaculating itself, regardless of the composition, and maybe the resulting release of various hormones? So is it more of an abstract energy related effect, or is it physiological, and wondering how vasectomy, what part vasectomy plays in that? So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, there's a difference between semen and sperm. So like seminal fluid, that's the ejaculate. Mm-hmm. So it may not have sperm in it if there's been a vasectomy.
Exactly.
But typically when men seek to learn about semen retention, it's because they desire to expand their own pleasure. They want to address an issue like premature ejaculation, or they want to become better lovers. So semen retention techniques typically aren't about birth control, and I probably would not recommend it as a consistent, reliable method of birth control.
I'm going to counter that. I've been using semen retention and the rhythm method for 12 years, and I have not had a pregnancy. So I'm just saying, if you have to be working with a master, though. So I just wanted to interject.
Yeah, I'm saying I probably would not. would not be my prescription for most people. But the methods because they enable men to separate that ejaculation from the orgasm, then it enables them to become multi-orgasmic, which of course makes them better lovers, and then enables them to expand their own pleasure and their ability to kind of ride those waves of pleasure. So for me, like, the one has nothing to do with the other. Yeah. Because if you don't have sperm in your semen, you still would greatly benefit from semen retention techniques to expand your pleasure and to expand your partner's pleasure. Again, you could end up with a baby, but
but not through Devi.
But not right.
You take other precautions. You can take other precautions. Awesome. What do you guys think? Yeah.
So I've had worked with a couple of clients who had the vasectomy done, and they actually came to me because they thought that they were having problems with PE, and it kind of turns out that it was mainly because when you go through, or for men what I've heard from men is when they've gone through the vasectomy, it's kind of like its own trauma, because there's this tendency to feel like it's taking some kind of manliness away from them, and that can sometimes cause it's a trauma then now, and it can cause you to become more anxious. It can cause a number of things, and so when working with the experience that I've had is that it really wasn't an issue because of the vasectomy. It was just that they were causing themselves to become a little bit more anxious. And once they were given the tools to start breathing and relaxing, then they could see that, at least the ones that I work with can see that they didn't have any kind of PE or any kind of issues or concerns.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lucy. And what are your thoughts, Rosie?
Yeah, I would agree with Karen. I think there are two separate things, and the benefit to semen retention, it goes far beyond not expressing sperm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's building up the health and the well-being of a man. It's balancing his downward voiding wind energy and gaining control over that, which, you know, has both a physical and sexual benefit, but also a healing benefit for the men who are doing it, that creates longevity and good health and helps them build muscle and regulate hormone balance, all those things. So that's like way beyond just not expelling sperm. And I think even, you know, on a psychological level, the fact that men are given permission to look deeply at their own sexuality, to feel some agency over what's happening, because so many men feel like, oh, my penis just does this thing, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. And I don't really, I understand that I get aroused and you do this and that, and, you know, ejaculation happens, but I don't think they feel a deep sense of agency, nor are they encouraged to explore their own sexuality. And this is encouraging them to explore their sexuality, to learn how to expand their pleasure, right? And how to get health benefits for their bodies and their well-being from their pleasure. Like, that in itself is radical. And again, sperm is not involved in any of that. So
that's amazing, that agency, that self-agency. And I 100% agree. And on a biological level, I have my 10 cents, but we are running out of time. So what I'm going to invite all you listeners to do is go to authentictantra.com and go to our blog, our articles page, and you will see this article, you will see this video, this episode, and you can read my response to that question, because it has to do with what the actual chemical components of ejaculate are, seminal fluid, and how that does have an impact on your body with or without sperm. So, so you can go to authentictantra.com and read my response. And for everybody listening tonight, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Lucia. It is amazing to have your wisdom and your input and your guidance. And I'm going to invite all of our listeners to, again, go to authentictantra.com to find out more about each of these amazing individuals and get links to their website so you can learn about how to deepen your experience of sexual healing and using sex as medicine with these incredible, incredible women. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next month. Well, we'll see you next week for another episode of Sex is Medicine, but we'll see you next month for another sexologist panel. Have a great night.